afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday. You have Alyssa Corum and Justin Nielsen here with a look at the stock market today. We're going to talk about the major indexes. Not a great day on Wall Street, Justin, but there were some pretty interesting names underneath the surface. And go ahead and give us a preview.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at Chinese brokerage Futu and also Rio Tinto in the mining space, and we'll end it up with a chemicals play. I'm just going to go with the ticker symbol on this one, ALB, because I just can't.
Albermarle.
There you go. Thank you so much for helping me out.
All right. Who knows? Maybe I didn't get it right, but we'll go with that. First, let's take a look at the major indexes. So the NASDAQ finishing down about 1% for the day. The Russell 2000, though, small caps looking like they got hit the hardest, down about 1.5%. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 fell 0.5%, and the Dow down 0.4%. But Justin, investors who have been following what we've been saying will know that over the last couple of weeks, with the moves that we've seen for the major indexes, we wouldn't have found it all too surprising to see at least a bit of a pause here, if not a pullback.
Well, and Ed and I kind of had a marathon session in your absence on Friday, and one of the big things that we were talking about is that we were getting into extended territory. Now, the thing about that is you never know when some type of pullback is going to happen. And look, if you've got good positions and you've got early entries and you've got cushion on your stocks, you can hold through that. But if you don't, or if you're doing more short-term trades, then you just have to know, hey, selling into some of that strength, not getting overly aggressive as the indexes get extended is really kind of one of the big rules that you want to stick by, because otherwise you get stuck and you start, it's really easy to, as the indexes continue making new highs, as the NASDAQ was getting near those new highs, it's real easy to start thinking, oh man, I'm missing out and I'm too light. And then you get too aggressive too quickly. And kind of that rule breaking, that undisciplined action can get you into trouble in a normal pullback. So that's why we are always warning when things are starting to look extended from their moving averages. In this case, above the 50-day moving average line is what we were kind of really looking at. And again, this is very normal. You're getting back to those old highs. Taking a pause right here is normal action and not concerning. Even the Russell 2000, which has been lagging for quite a bit, is still really hugging its 50-day moving average line. So looking at IWM, which is the iShares Russell 2000 ETF. So there's really nothing too much to be concerned about here, but it can still be painful if you're getting hit in your individual stocks.
And I think all the portfolio management tips that you shared there, Justin, totally makes sense. And just to add to that, I think it's also why it's important to not be overly concentrated. It may have been exciting to see all of these tech names starting to move higher, but if you were too concentrated into that, today might have felt really painful, because it seems like even though things are heading in the right direction overall, when you take a step back, we're still seeing some of these rotations from group to group underneath the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does make it a little bit trickier. There certainly still does seem to be a lot of those cyclical plays that are showing strength. Not our typical can slim oriented stocks. The growth names, there's a lot more of the cyclical, so things like earnings are not as much in focus, because with cyclical names you do have this tendency of, okay, you get poor earnings and then the earnings start ramping up, and by the time the earnings ramp up and start looking good, well, the stock move is over. So you have to play those a little bit differently, turnarounds, things like that we've been seeing lately, because that's what's happening in the economy, right? This is a big turnaround from a shutdown basically in the economy to what's expected to be some pretty large numbers in GDP growth that we haven't seen in a very long time.
Well, one high-flying growth stock in 2020 that is back in the spotlight today would be Futu Holdings. Now, Justin, in February, this stock basically went from 200 to 100 in a pretty short period, but it's been on the up and up and had some nice tighter action around its 50-day line, and today a really big move.
Yeah, so the thing that would have maybe disqualified us from looking at this too closely before was that this was off 50% from its highs. And usually when you get those types of deep bases, that's something that we tend to shy away from. Now, when you put it in the perspective of this huge move that it had up to 204, that does seem a little bit more reasonable. I mean, that was, it kept the bulk of those gains. So if you were trying to get into this, one of the things that I like to see is a little bit of a calming down. So this is tighter action. Now, let's put this in perspective. For Futu, this is a more volatile stock, and its calmer action is still movement that can be 10% in a day. So it's if you don't have the stomach for it, this is not for the faint of heart. But we did put this on Swing Trader. This is something we were talking about on IBD Live today. I actually added a small position for myself in my own account. After the restriction was off on this one.
Right.
And again, it's I'm not going large on this, but just to get a piece of this because this was bucking the trend of weakness. It was looking strong this morning, and it continued to strengthen. And by the end of the day, we were up well over 5% from our entry on what was a very strong day.
That's right. Okay, so if this is the first time it's getting on the radar of an investor out there who's watching this, you wouldn't want to chase it at this point, right? What
No,
kind of
no.
action would you want to see Futu have from this point to
Well,
find a new potential entry?
right. And I guess my main point here was to just kind of give people a sense of how they might get into something that bases so deeply, because again, that's not our norm. So this is more of an educational lesson. It's a little bit out of there now,
Yeah.
but I wanted people to know that for the future because guess what? A lot of this stuff repeats itself, and so you might say, why do you guys spend so much time on historical charts when you look at a lot of the things that we write about in the paper? And there's a reason for it because this stuff does repeat. And so, right now, I think this is extended and probably out of the gate. Maybe look for this to get back up to 200. If you bought this, and you get up to 200, I mean, that's a pretty good move and very conceivable that it can do it. But then beyond that, you're going to have to wait for probably a handle, a pullback, and maybe a fresh setup.
All right. Well, metals and chemical stocks have been in the spotlight over the last couple of months. So let's check in on Rio Tinto and Albermarle. So first, Rio, ticker RIO. This was the stock of the day today, and it's seen a nice streak of gains as it's carving out the right side of the base.
Yeah, so I mean the thing here is you just have to recognize where that strength has been. If you've been trying to play some of the older leaders of 2020, you might be very frustrated this year and have been, having a difficult time making progress. Where a lot of the action has been is in the miners, the steel stocks, and things like this, the chemical plays, the fertilizers. This has been where a lot of the action has been. And Rio Tinto, one of the things that stuck out today for us and why it became stock of the day was because even when the metal and miners were looking strong this morning, they did pull back, but Rio Tinto really held up strong and finished kind of carving up this right side of its cup base. Now, this is kind of a very strong move off of its bottom of the cup. I would expect to see maybe some pause here as it gets to those former highs, but that's not always what happens. Sometimes these stocks will just break right through that cup area, that previous area of resistance, the previous high. So, you got to be prepared for it to go either way. And that's an important thing to do, is to be thinking ahead. If the stock does this, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle it? It's always a good idea to have that plan in place so that you're not trying to make an emotional decision in the heat of battle. Rather, you're just executing a plan that you came up with earlier.
That's exactly right. And last but not least, Albermarle, ticker ALB, back above its 10-week line on the weekly chart here. But Justin, it's still about 16% off of its 52-week highs as it forms the right side of the base. But again, this chemicals group has seen a lot of strong performers lately. So this 50-day moving average, a move above it, would you consider that an actionable opportunity?
Well, here again, I'm going to kind of give a lesson here because I'm a little lukewarm on this one. While I like the
Right.
action of showing a break above a downtrend. I like the action of it getting back above the 50-day moving average line. I'm always a little concerned when something is getting above a 50-day line that is downtrending. So that's one thing. Now let's go ahead and go back to the weekly chart. And one of the things too to note on this is that the relative strength isn't great. Now, I would expect that because it's been basing while the S&P 500 has been going up. But since this group has been strong during this time, it begs the question, why is this one not participating as much? Exactly. And then as a final note, if you kind of look, down below at the volume, it's always a good idea to kind of check out what's happening on the volume side. And right now I'm seeing a lot of red volume on that left-hand side, spiking up above that wiggly red line, which is the average volume. So those spikes, kind of on the red side, I want to see some blue balance that out. And so far, I haven't been seeing blue spikes. So that's something that I'm going to be looking for if I'm going to get involved in this stock. And again, it's in the right industry, it's in the right group. But if I'm going to get involved, I'm going to want to see something to balance out that volume that was happening on the sell side. I'm going to want to see some more positive action. So while I like the fact that it's gotten back above the 10-week moving average line, I like that it's breaking this downtrend. I'm myself probably going to hold off on this one for now and wait for some more evidence.
Yeah, I think it's right. It goes to show you that just because a stock is in a hot group doesn't mean it's the best stock to buy. You really need to take a closer look at that price and volume action and that relative strength to give you clues as to whether it's something worthy of adding to your portfolio. So thank you so much for that analysis, Justin. And thank you for tuning in. The conversation is going to continue tomorrow morning on IBD Live. Don't miss it. Investors.com/IBD Live. We'll see you there, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow after the close.